good to go. So let's join on Facebook and YouTube. Okay, so we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Hi, everybody. Okay, much better. Awesome. We figured it out.
Good.
We do therapy and law, but we're
figuring out technology.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Attorney 𝒊𝒎𝒎𝒊𝒈𝒓𝒂𝒏𝒕, and I have a special guest tonight, Miss Yuri Scott, a licensed professional counselor. We've been talking about this since yesterday. I am super excited to have her, and I'm super excited to be back as well. Good to see you guys as well. Last week I was gone with my family, needed time off because I have gray hair for a reason, but I needed to go. But I am so excited for you guys to hear from a professional tonight, that one of the people that makes my work a lot easier. It's never easy, but it gets easier because we always think we know. I think we're still echoing again. Nice to meet you guys as well. Okay, that's better. So once again, this is Attorney 𝒊𝒎𝒎𝒊𝒈𝒓𝒂𝒏𝒕, and I have Ms. Yuri Scott with me. Ms. Scott is a licensed professional counselor and licensed in the states of Georgia and Florida.
Yes, Texas is coming soon. Texas is coming
soon. Y'all hear that? That would be great because I have to ask Chris, but I think most of our clients are actually based out of Texas. But so you hear that Texas is coming soon. Come on in, say hello. If you have questions for me, Scott, please put them in the comment section like we always do, and we get to those later on. But if you know anyone who is interested in hearing this, this is absolutely important. I cannot stress the importance of a mental, psychological evaluation in your humanitarian immigration cases. If you need to contact my office, and we'll get to Ms. Scott's contact later on. If you need to contact my office, our number is 334-341-4475. Our email is olalayalawfirm.com. Social media, Olalaya Immigration. YouTube, subscribe. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere. So once again, please, everyone, welcome Ms. Scott. And I guess everyone can hear us. Perfect. Okay. So Ms. Scott is licensed, like I said, in the states of Georgia and Florida, and Texas is coming soon. How soon do we know?
It's pending.
Okay. That is
good. We're still getting feedback, aren't we?
Hello, Ms. Kiwa. How are you? Thank you. Yeah, but it's not, I think it's good.
Okay.
Are you guys good with what you're hearing? I know we just wanted to be able to utilize all three platforms so that everybody gets to ask questions and come in. And trust me, you don't want to miss what we want to talk about tonight. And you understand why it is important to have evaluation done, especially when it comes to humanitarian cases, Vawa, asylum, and understanding the difference between a general therapist, nothing against a general therapist, but a general therapist compared to someone who's experienced in immigration-related cases. So without further ado, let's talk about some. Scotty's license. She provides psychotherapy and immigration evaluations to include specifically VAWA cases and asylum cases. I do quite a number of VAWA cases, asylum cases, and I have to tell you, I am very, very particular with the therapists that I work with, because a big part of being able to build a case for clients has a lot to do with the credence that is given and credibility that USCIS or the Immigration Court gives to therapist evaluation report. I've seen some reports and I say, I can tell just reading it, it's not from someone who understands the plight of immigrants. So that's one of the things Ms. Scott is going to address with you guys tonight. And so let's start. Ms. Scott, now let me put this out there. I make referrals. I don't take anything from a therapist fee. And I don't do that because I need to be able to be objective and make the recommendations that I need for my clients. so that I don't feel like I am pressured or because I'm getting something I can know. I need to, and when she sent me something and I said, okay, can we change this? Can we do that? Or it doesn't match, or this is different. It's not a case of trying to add anything. It's trying to make sure that the client's case is presented the way it should be from a professional standpoint. Okay, so Ms. Scott, why do we need, or why do immigrants need psychological evaluation in immigration cases?
Yes, the reader has to understand the psychological and mental impact that your situation has had on you. And it needs to come from your voice, and it needs to be unbiased. And so this is a professional report that is going to allow any reader to read it to understand, one, how you've been impacted, whether it be economic abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, or emotional abuse. So each of them have different categories. And so it's very clear for the reader to see exactly what has happened and exactly how it's still having a lasting impact on you.
Everybody get that? It's just not about, okay, I don't need therapy. It's about someone who understands. And Miss Scott, when it comes to evaluation, a lot of the cases that I do, especially in VAWA cases, are non-physical abuse. We don't have physical abuse proof.
Mm-hmm.
What part or what role does an evaluation report play in helping cases where it's a non-physical abuse? So we're talking emotional, we're talking verbal, we're talking psychological abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse that is no proof. What role does a professional evaluation report play when it comes to evidence on that?
Well, we know that abuse does not always leave physical scars. Sometimes abuse leaves emotional scars that people cannot see. And so I believe in using your testimony and pulling out specific examples of what has happened to you to illustrate that abuse has taken place. And I believe if we use an example, it would be easier for people to understand. So let's say, for example, let's just take economic abuse. Let's just say that your spouse is in control of the finances. And in order for you to be able to purchase the things that are necessary, daily needs, toiletries, pay your cell phone bill, let's say that your spouse makes it to where they are in control of all of the finances. Having to come to your spouse to ask them to purchase things that are necessary for you, and having them say no, or having you perform sexual acts to get these things, or belittling you because you need these things, is a pattern of economic abuse. And with testimony and examples, it's clear to see. So if I ask you, let's say, for example, how did it make you feel when you went to your spouse and you asked them for a ride to work and they said, no, walk? How did that make you feel? And by you explaining how it made you feel, how it was belittling, how you were afraid to ask for the things that you needed, that outlines to the reader, wow, this is a form of power and control, which is a clear-cut definition of psychological and emotional abuse.
And just to piggyback on the power and control, there is, as attorneys, as licensed professionals, there is the control and power wheel that professionals use. And tell us more about that.
Yes. So the power and control also has phases and cycles. And so let's say, for example, it starts out as there's a triggering event that happens that makes your spouse angry. After the event that makes your spouse angry, there's an explosion. Maybe they shout, they yell, they threaten divorce. After that, they apologize. They promise that it's never going to happen again. Then we take this power of control wheel and we see what were the impacts of this cycle of abuse? Were you afraid? Were you fearful? Were you sad? Did you cry? Did you feel withdrawn from society? Did you have trouble sleeping? Did it affect your diet? All of these things contribute to the trauma. And as a licensed therapist, I am able to diagnose if fit. Some clients do not meet a diagnosis, but some do. And some of the common diagnoses that I see are adjustment disorder with anxiety, adjustment disorder with depression, major depressive disorder, or in severe cases, there is post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Perfect. And I wanted to also mention when Ms. Scott references economic abuse, that's the same thing as financial abuse, financial control. Now, why is it important for a client or patient to see someone who is not just and I don't use just word loosely, but not a general therapist as compared to someone who is experienced in immigration related cases? And I'll put it this way. I practice immigration law. I cannot help anybody when it comes to estate planning because I have zero clue about what goes on. It is not my field. It's not my area of, expertise. So in that realm, why it doesn't matter to make sure that as a patient, as a client who has a Vawa case, who has an asylum case, you have fear of returning to your country. It's a mental abuse, more or less. You have this mental fear of. Sometimes you can't describe it, but a professional can explain that to an officer. Why is it important to meet with a professional who understands immigrants' plight, who is experiencing immigration-related cases, as compared to a general therapist?
Mm-hmm. I think an example would help our audience understand. So a general therapist who does not have training in immigration would maybe give a depression inventory, and the client on the depression inventory, the client is going to say, yes, I experienced these symptoms. They're going to answer it yes or no. That general therapist will take that information and they may say, oh no, I'm not seeing anything that might justify VAWA or asylum. Someone who's trained in immigration.
I'm sorry to tell you, but I want you guys to listen. This is where the point is. Please pay attention. This is what makes the difference between just, a general practitioner and an experienced immigration-related practitioner.
Someone who's trained in immigration will be able to take not only the questionnaire, they will be able to take the evidence that you are presenting, and they will be able to compare the two. So let's say, for example, a male. Men normally underrepresent their emotions and their feelings, right?
Exactly.
And so given that general questionnaire on a depression inventory, they may underrate how that trauma has impacted them. Whereas in immigration, someone who's trained in immigration can use those examples and can see the disparity between what they are expressing, what they are sharing, their background, the cause of the asylum that they are seeking, and they can take that questionnaire and they can show that there are discrepancies. So I may say to a male client, you underrated that you are sad or depressed, but here you stated that every time your spouse came home, you felt belittled or you felt undermined. And so someone who's trained in immigration is not only going to take what is written, but they're able to look deeper, they're able to look at the circumstances, and they're able to put it all together to paint a more clear picture.
And talk to us about having a detailed, and I've seen her reports, and I know, and like I said, I am very, very picky. I'm very particular. Like, I'm surprised I haven't driven her crazy yet, but she knows what she's doing. So on that note, can you talk about why it's important not to just have a letter from a therapist saying, oh yeah, you had assessment, compared to a detailed report of background? What is it? What is the diagnosis? What is the assessment? Why do you believe this person has been abused? What's your recommendation? Why that makes a difference compared to just one page letter. They saw me on this date, yada yada yada.
A one-page letter, and I've seen those letters, a one-page letter is not going to be descriptive enough to support a diagnosis. And so if I am diagnosing a client, let's say with post-traumatic stress syndrome, I have to show evidence to support that the trauma that have experienced supports the diagnosis. And so it's very hard to support a diagnosis in a one-page letter. I have to show examples in different areas of why I have come to this conclusion. I use 3 or 4 assessments. I use an anxiety scale, a relationship scale, and a depression scale, and a post-traumatic stress syndrome scale in order to come up with this diagnosis, along with 2 hour-and-a-half interviews with the client. So, I mean, it takes evidence to support what I'm giving, the diagnosis that I'm giving.
Yes. And I want to reiterate what Ms. Scott just said. It's not a case where you just walk in and you have an appointment and they see you for 15 minutes. They give you maybe a prescription, and then they give you a letter and they say, okay, yeah, go. And that is part of your Vawa case. That's part of your Asylum case. No, I've seen that. Like she said, I've seen that, and I'm thinking, okay, I can tell just from reading this person does not understand what the goal is. Not, and let me be clear. There's nothing taken away from anyone's qualifications, but we all have our areas of expertise. That's what makes the difference. And you talked about men and how it is so difficult for men, but have you seen in your practice, especially when it comes to evaluating African immigrants, that men are more? Have you seen that men are more reluctant to talk, and how does the culture and tradition play a role in that? And what do you do to get them to actually open up to you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. I think culturally, African men, I'm African myself. I was raised by an African man, and you are taught to be strong. You are taught to be the head of the household. You are taught to be the breadwinner. And when they are coming to me, especially in cases of VAWA, it's a very vulnerable process because they are coming saying that my spouse, who I loved, who I married, who I trusted, has completely done a 180, and I am left hurt. I am left feeling abused, and I am having lasting effects. And so in order to pull it out of them, I take them back to when these things happen. So let's say, for example, their wife called them names, humiliated them in front of other people. Going back to those examples and really pulling it out, how did it make you feel when that happened? Who was around you? Who was the witness to this? How did it make you feel? Then it really does begin to open up the wounds. And I always say, we're going to open it up. We're going to be raw. We're going to close it back, and we're going to heal. So I don't just leave, my clients open and raw with these emotions. We do, go through a process where I understand that the things that they are sharing with me are probably the first time they're ever sharing it with, probably the first time they're ever sitting in front of a therapist ever.
Exactly.
So, just having them to understand that this is for a purpose, and that we want the reader to really experience what you went through at the time that it happened. Because now you may be fine. You may be telling me about something that happened 6 months ago. You may have had time to process and heal from it. But taking them back to the time of the event that it happened really does help them to be more vulnerable.
And have you seen that many more immigrant men, and I have more male VAWA clients than I have females. And I actually had someone who met with you and came back and told me, like, he didn't know he needed therapy. So, and that had, because it's there, I'm African Nigerian. You're raised to, you don't show emotions, you suck it up. Mm-hmm. And have you seen that a lot of men do not even realize until they've been evaluated by a licensed professional like yourself that what they have experienced or what has happened, the treatment, the behavior is actually abuse, but they
Yes.
just disregard or they just decide that it's not.
Yes, that has happened so many times. So in all of my with my clients, we go through the report together, together one-on-one before we send it to you. And so when we're going through the report one-on-one, and we get to the point where if they have a diagnosis, I'm explaining to them what that means and how I've come to that. That is very eye-opening for someone to read. You know, my what I've been experiencing is anxiety. The reason why that I can't sleep at night, the reason why I have lost motivation is depression. And to hear this for the first time, I think it does two things. One, it's reassuring because they realize that what they've been going through is real, and they may have been trying to rationalize it and have not had a name to put on it. And I think on the other end, it gives them the tools on how to move forward, how to heal.
And that is just excellent. And I wanted you mentioned about having a one-on-one review with a client, with a patient. And I want you guys to listen to this. I have seen, and I have a client here that we're working on an appeal of advised denial based solely, and she's here, and I don't want her to say anything, but she's not ashamed of it. She knows, based solely on the evaluation report of the therapies she used. That's the sole reason why her case was denied, and it's clearly stated in the denial letter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, in her case, she was referred to an attorney, and I know this attorney, and this attorney referred to people who charge a whole lot, and this cut is very reasonable with a fee, and he gets a cut. And the one thing that I could not understand, and with your profession, there is no requirement that a licensed profession counselor has to give you the report. There's no requirement, but someone who understands that it's important to be able to speak on your behalf through their report for your case to be able to live an abuse-free life understands why you have to be a part of that. She was never given this report. It was sent directly to the attorney. The attorney did not review the report, send it to Vermont Service Center. They denied the case, and now we're having to do an appeal. Never saw the report until when she retained my services, and I contacted the therapist myself and say, do you understand that this case was denied solely based on this? And they were beating around the bush. If you are seeing a licensed professional counselor and the person does not give you a chance to review the report, please understand that it's time you don't even have to get to that point. When you make the very first meeting, and that's what I do before I refer a client. I'm working with a therapist and I'm already asking, does my client get a chance to review? Do I get a chance to review? And it's not, do we get a chance to make edits and whatever the case may be, so they don't feel, because it's bad enough what they're going through. If they're not intimidated by a professional, then what's the point? And so you must be able to review your report. And that's where it comes into play, not only for Ms. Scott, but when we have declarations done, what is in the report has to match your affidavit. If it contradicts your affidavit, that is a problem in your case. So that is one thing she does that is important, very, very essential. Now, let's talk about women and sexual abuse. Like I said, we talked about why a report actually helps you when your case is non-physical abuse, because the majority of cases are that. A lot of immigrant women have been raised in cultures where they believe, well, if I'm married, if he says he wants sex, then I don't have a choice but to accept. Why is that married or rape, and how is that conveyed from a professional counselor's point of view?
Yes. So if a woman or man says no, they do not want to engage in sexual activity, then that answer is no, and it should be respected. But what we're seeing is there are women who are being coerced, who are being threatened who are being bullied into performing sexual acts out of fear because they feel that they have no choice. And this is a very sensitive, very, very delicate and sensitive subject. And so first of all, I do this in the second interview. That way we've already had time to spend with each other. I let them know that in the next interview, we are going to be discussing this. So any thoughts that come up between now and the second interview, please journal about it, write about it, think about it, because it is going to be a sensitive topic. So when that woman comes and says, my husband threatened me to have sex, or I needed to have sex with him in order to buy toiletries or to buy formula for the baby, or he promised that he would pay for me to go to school if I did this, I explain to them first. I start with education, explaining to them what that means and what has happened to them. And then we go into the trauma. Okay, since this has happened to you, what are the effects of this? Right? So then we go from education to assessment to trauma to healing.
So, let me see. What else have we not talked about before we get to questions? I think I see one or two. As far as we've talked about let's talk a little bit about asylum. So an example will be a man who's from a culture, and in Nigeria, many parts of Nigeria, even though they say female genital mutilation is banned, the reality is the Nigerian government doesn't stop tradition. Tradition remains tradition. People are in charge of what they believe. And you have a man who is here, is seeking asylum based on the fact that his mother was circumcised, his wife was, and he's looking at his young daughter like, no, I'll be dead first before you do that. But whenever I have clients like that and I ask them, okay, you've submitted your case, did you have a psychological evaluation done? And they're looking at me, no, why would I want to do that? It's not for me, it's my daughter. And I go, you're seeking asylum to protect someone. There's an effect it is had on you, and it will have on you should she go through that process. How does psychological evaluation help them to see that that's part of your evidence and be able to express why it will be torture, persecution for you if you're not allowed to stay to protect your daughter, whether or not your daughter is a citizen, but she needs the parent. If you're not allowed to stay, how does it affect you, and how does your role help with that?
So I think that separating what has been done culturally or traditionally from what is illegal and what is trauma is the first step. Because sometimes, because something has always been done a certain way, people do not realize that does not make it right. That does not make it correct.
Sister, preaching.
Right.
Listen.
So in this case, if there is someone who has been a subject to female mutilation or tribal mutilation, them going through a psychological evaluation will show the lasting impacts that it has had on them, the psychological impacts that it has had on them. If they have gone through ridicule, bullying, isolation, these are all examples of psychological and emotional abuse. And so having that assessment for their child also shows the trauma that they would endure returning back into that culture, back into that country.
Exactly. And the same thing applies because with the new I forget the case name now, but it was a case out of Guatemala where back in the last administration, they said domestic abuse was not peculiar, so it shouldn't become it shouldn't apply to women who were actually classified as members of a particular social group, because based on the culture, based on the tradition, they were subjected to domestic abuse at the hands of their husbands. But now it is back on as a claim as part of being a member of a particular social group. So when you talk to a woman who is from a culture where, because in Nigeria, for instance, and I can use Nigeria because I'm from there, I'm Nigerian, and I know that happens. We recently had a gospel singer who allegedly her husband beat her to death. Basically, it's something that's still alive and well, domestic violence. And you have a lot of people who tell you stay married, because you get married, you don't get divorced, is a taboo. When you see a woman who's been through domestic abuse, how does having an evaluation help her to see that you are a part of this group, and that is why you fear returning because you may end up dead?
The psychological evaluation is going to outline exactly the trauma that they have went through, they've experienced, the history of abuse, and the impact that it would have on them returning. So if they return to their country, if they return, they would be a subject of abuse or isolation or ridicule. I think one of the things that we have not talked about that I wanted to touch on, if we have
Yes.
time, is using the immigration status as a form of abuse as well.
That
And
was going to be
so
my
this,
last question. The last,
yes,
if you want to start that, or if you want to finish that one, then that was going to be the last, because that's the main thing we want to talk. Okay.
yes. So let me give you an example. If your spouse says, if they have agreed to help you with your immigration status in any way, but as soon as there's an argument, they threaten to use that against you, or they hide your documents, or they don't allow you to progress in your process, or they're threatening divorce every time you bring up your process. This is a form of immigration as a form of abuse. And a lot of people do not realize that.
You don't
Using your
hear that?
immigration status
Please say it
against you.
again. And I
Mhm.
see that a lot. I had a client in the consultation tell me today, but he's not obligated to help me file. I said, he's not obligated to help you file, but you were in legal status. He told you, don't go back to Cameroon. I want you to stay and I will file your papers. He told you you have 2 kids. You were going back to sea. He told you stay here. You're now stuck here. That is control.
Mhm.
So please talk more about how that keeps you grounded. They keep you where they want you to be,
Mhm.
and where having an evaluation and by a professional who is experiencing immigration related cases, how that helps you get out of that and also speaks on your behalf.
I am going to show that they use your immigration status against you as a form of power and control. And because of that, you stayed in this situation out of fear. Because if you would have left, you were afraid that your process would be canceled or they would report you. That's another one that I hear often. If you leave, if you don't do this, if you don't have sex with me, then I will have you deported. I will have you deported. That is another form of immigration status as a form of control. And a psychological evaluation is going to be able to clearly identify and define and educate your reader on how this was used against you.
And also, how does, because I've had clients who have had previous cases denied, they would say, well, we weren't prepared, or my spouse did not show up, or they said they forgot. How does a denial based on the spouse's behavior, how do you see when you're now evaluating a client, how do you make them see that even that is part of immigration abuse, and
Mhm.
why you are able to now, for instance, through the Vawa case and through my report, be able to tell your story and as what they actually did to
Mhm.
make that be the result of a denial, and
Mhm.
why they use that to control you and make them see that and during the evaluation.
I will ask them very specific questions. Were there times in your marriage where your spouse committed to doing X, Y, and Z? They committed to going to your interview. They committed to filing your paperwork. And then for some reason, they refused. And why did they refuse? If they refused because, oh, you did not do something that they wanted you to do, or you did not perform an act, or you didn't let them go through your cell phone, all of these are examples, that don't justify their reason for not going or for not showing up or for reneging.
Exactly. So I think because I'm looking down, like, 'cause I had questions for you. I'm like, okay, I got to come prepared. So let's see. I want to make sure that I've covered everything. Evaluation, allowed to understand. Okay, treatment of the African man. Is there any other information you feel that the viewers will listeners will benefit from, particularly why, and I keep saying that it's not about just seeing the therapist, going to a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor. That is completely different from seeing a psychologist, and then completely different from seeing the general psychologist to someone who has experience in immigration cases. What else can you share with us?
I think somebody who is trained in immigration is just going to understand what VAWA is, what asylum is, and what are the terms for fitting into under those umbrellas, right? A therapist who is not trained is going to check for trauma. They are going to check for abuse and they are able to diagnose, but they don't necessarily understand how those things fit under the VAWA umbrella and how it
Exactly.
fits under the asylum umbrella.
Exactly.
You can have all the ingredients to make a cake, right? You can read a cookbook, but that doesn't mean it's going to end up edible.
And that's me. I'm not a baker. I can read till Jesus comes back. I cannot bake to save my life. So, and on that note, that says it all. Someone asked on YouTube, and good discussion, Miss Scott. They said good discussion. Someone says Celia says, I'm going to put it up. How much visits is enough? I'm assuming she means how many visits do you need to have per sessions that will be enough. I'm guessing that's Miss Scott's question. She's got how many visits are enough?
So it comes with 2. So we meet twice. So it's 2 visits that we have together. And then I go through detailed interview, detailed questioning. It's already outlined. And so it usually takes about 2 sessions.
So tell us about your process from, and I will get you guys Miss Scott's contact. I'll put it on the screen. Tell us about your process from when a client contacts you on their own, or let me even back up a little bit. Now, you can contact Miss Scott and I'll put her contact information. However, keep in mind that working with an attorney who also understands that we're working hand in hand, side by side. Your report, the declaration we're putting, my cover letter is all together coming to form your credible evidence in your asylum case, in your VAWA case. It's credible evidence standard. And so, being able to see, like, I'm working with an attorney who's working with my therapist, and everyone is working in my favor, and my declaration tells my story. It matches what is in my report, but the report is also a professional standpoint, and that everything comes together. So whether it's a referral from a lawyer or a client contacts you themselves or patient, tell us from your process, what is the first session about, second session, and then finally the review, and then the report.
Okay. The first contact is usually through email. Somebody reaches out to me through email. We do a phone call, which is a consultation. And my main question is, what led you to seek VAWA, or what led you to seek asylum? They tell me kind of their overview of what they've been through. It's usually maybe like a 15-30-minute conversation. From there, I let them know that I'm going to be sending them an email. In that email is new client paperwork, and that is consent for me to meet with you, consent for us to enter into this therapist-client relationship. They fill out their new client paperwork. Everything is HIPAA compliant. Everything is electronic. From there, we set our first session. The first session, we go through the relationship, your past history, where you're from, your parents, your upbringing, and your relationship. The second session is the psychological and the abuse that you endured. After the 2 sessions, I usually take a few weeks. I write your report. After I write your report, I send you an email letting you know that your report is finished, and that when is there a time that we could review the report. You get a copy of the report that has draft on it. You're able to read the report. If there's anything that was unclear, or if there's anything that came up that you wanted to add, you have an opportunity to do that. I then edit the report again, put my final touches on it, my signature, and then I send it to the lawyer.
And that is another thing. Please understand, if you have a report that is not signed by the professional counselor, it's when people send me, or if I review a file and someone says, okay, I did my VAWA case myself, and I say, okay, where's your declaration? And I read their declaration, and I'm looking for where's the place where you signed and had it notarized. Anybody can write anything and put a signature. It doesn't carry any weight compared to if you have a signed and witness in front of the notary public and it's notarized. Because when I go to court, when I do criminal defense and I do family cases, we must have, if someone is not coming in, their sworn testimony in paper form has to be notarized. That's the equivalent of you having your declaration notarized. That's equivalent of the licensed professional counselor having their report signed. It's just not, okay, everybody typed the name. Who typed it? You got to understand that it's important to know that you're crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's. And I'm going to put this on Facebook. I'm not going to say her full name, but I know who this is, and you know who this is. You've met with this person before. She says, good evening, Miss Olalay and Miss Scott. It's so good to see you both together. I'll send you an email to let you know who that is. I know exactly who it is. Let me see if we have any questions from Miss Scott on Instagram. I don't want to miss that because I know I've been focusing more on, okay, review is very important. Absolutely. Someone said I read my report 3 times. Yes. Okay. Everyone is. We have a full house today. Everyone is like, okay, yeah, there's some things you just don't miss. So I think those are all the questions that we have. Now, just to reiterate, that's the process. It is important to understand that when you have asylum cases, for the most part, unless you have gang-related or, injuries or whatever, but for the most part, just like VAWA cases, most of the time are not non-physical evidence. Because you have non-physical evidence you're working with, I don't have any case that I take on and I don't tell the person, please understand, go ahead and ask a question, Gorilla03, that I have to refer you to the therapists that I work with. You don't have to, you can choose whoever you want to work with, but you all have to understand that if I read their report, I'm not going to work with them. Very, very clear. Can I save this live for those? Oh, absolutely, we'll save it. And I'll also post on Miss Scott's page. And let's see. Glad to see us both talking. Miss Scott, before I forget, can you give me your phone number so I can put that on the screen?
Yes. 678-468-5090.
Okay. I am, let's see. So let's go back. If you are on Facebook or YouTube, you're going to see the number on the screen. Let me edit this. Give me 1 second. Because people work for their title. So I got to put the title and everything she's earned on it. So let's try that one more time. Yeah, I'm Nigerian, so So that's Miss Scott, LPC, licensed professional counselor, 678-46. That's the number. Contact her. She is very, very apt and very quick to respond to messages. If you call her, if you can get her, you will certainly get a response back within an hour, within 2 hours. I can attest to that. Please hear us loud and clear. Yes, I'll post it. Make sure you're helping your case, you're helping yourself, and getting the professional that is experienced in the case type that you have, your immigration case type you have, VAWA case, asylum case, humanitarian parole, whatever it is. Make sure you understand, you do your review, you do your background. If you're my client, you already know how that works. And it's a team effort to be able to have people, not just your attorney, because there's all I can put together is your case, your evidence. I'm not a licensed professional counselor who is qualified to assess you and give their professional opinion to USCIS, to the immigration court, because that carries a lot of weight. So we thank you, Ms. Scott.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And so it's a pleasure working with you. And if you guys need Instagram, I can't believe that. But once again, her number is 678-468-5090. 5090. That's Miss Yuri Scott, LPC, licensed professional counselor. She can help you if you live in the state of Florida, if you live in the state of Georgia. Thank you for responding to that today. I appreciate that. I think I may have someone else. I'm not. He hasn't decided what state he's living in. But I think he's in the process of moving. And she's going to be licensed in the state of Texas. That's pending. As soon as I have information from her that we're good to go, I'll let you guys know in Texas that you're good to go. So you have a question. Go ahead with your question before we sign off. Gorilla03, because we're signing off. Is your question for Ms. Scott? Because that's what we're talking about today. Okay, I'm not getting a response. But once again, now, if you need us with your immigration cases, my contact is 334-341-4475. I am that attorney that reviews every single psychological report. If a name is, I review it because that's what you're paying me for. That's what you're paying me for. That's part of what you retain Miss Scott for, so that we know and we're working hand in hand to make sure we're putting out information and evidence on your behalf that makes sense, that helps your case. So contact our immigration firm, Alalaya Law Firm, 334-341-4475. If you need you've heard why it's important to have a psychological evaluation in your cases, humanitarian cases. Absolutely. I don't say mandatory, but it's all more or less mandatory. It's your call, but there's no one that when people ask me, why do I need it? And I tell you, this is why. But after your first session, you will come back and tell me why you understand where I was coming from. Because I can only tell you so much until you've had that first session. And so that's why it's important. Once again, Ms. Scott, Ms. Yuri Scott, LPC, licensed professional counselor. Contact number is 678-468-5090. I will share this video. Please share with people who may benefit from that. And we thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.